non-governmental organization Open Secrets is investigating alleged human rights violations in war-torn and autocratic African and Middle Eastern countries. This is by South African mobile giant MTN and its subsidiaries. This relates to internet shutdowns during wars and elections, and it includes in markets like Afghanistan, Sudan, DRC and Nigeria. For more on this, let's speak now to Open Secrets investigator and Shutdown Everywhere You Go author, Abby May. Abby, good evening to you and thank you very much for your time. Let's start with why MTN piqued your interest in the first place. Why did you choose to investigate this company and its subsidiaries?
So at Open Secrets for quite a long while now, we've been investigating private companies and their, alleged human rights violations and the corruption that plays into that. And one of the biggest issues that we have had to grapple with in our work is this idea of, okay, how exactly do you hold this private company accountable? And MTN piqued our interest because the telecommunications industry in and of itself is very interesting, where you have large private companies providing services connected to absolutely vital, communication services that are vital to human rights. For example, the freedom of speech and, access to information. And what was interesting about MTN is that in 2020, the MTN group made a big decision that they were going to completely exit the Middle Eastern market, right? This was despite the fact that, a lot of their MTN subsidiaries in the Middle East, think Yemen, think Syria, for example, made them quite a lot of money. And the reason the MTN group gave at the time was that, hey, we're leaving because we want to focus on our African subsidiaries. We are a South African company, proudly so, and our biggest markets are essentially Nigeria and South Africa, and we want to focus on that. Okay, great. But when you look deeper into that story in and of itself, what you find is that a lot of MTN's Middle Eastern subsidiaries had a lot of allegations of human rights violations, alleged enabling of terror activities, for example, in Afghanistan. And they had a variety of civil suits that were following them. And we thought this was very curious. And that's how we got into the report.
Yeah. And so exactly what you have just recounted now, your report suggesting that MTN has enabled human rights violations, corruption, and tax evasion, among other serious allegations. How will you be able to prove these allegations, or were they indeed proved by your investigations?
So, on the point of MTN shutting down the internet, that is a proven fact. MTN and Vodacom have been involved in internet shutdowns because they are contractually obligated by the governments that employ them to provide these services, right, to shut down the internet. On your second question, the reason why it's so difficult to prove this is because technically, shutting down the internet in a country is not technically illegal. This is because the government and the telcos themselves enter a contractual agreement. And oftentimes, when they enter that contractual agreement, the government entities themselves make it very clear that, hey, there's going to be points and exceptions where we're going to come to you and tell you, you need to shut down the internet at this point in time. And that is placed into the contractual agreement in and of itself, right? And so many telcos around the world, MTN included, have said, hey, this is our legal contractual obligation to the government. There's nothing we can do about it. We're really, really sorry. And to MTN's credit, they've been one of the few that have actually been very vocal about the fact that this is what's happening. These are the transparency reporting that we're trying to do. However, just because something is said to be legal, does that make it absolutely right? And our report is trying to question that exact thing
Yeah.
and bring forward to these telcos, hey, we see that you are actually providing vital services while at the same time trying to make millions and millions in profit. However, when and where do you put human rights ahead of your profits and how? And it's a very tricky line.
Yeah. And your report says some of the countries mentioned in it, they include Sudan, which is still trapped in a civil war as we speak. What would you say was MTN's role in this country, perhaps in aiding and abetting what's going on?
So, in the context of Sudan, MTN Sudan is a subsidiary of the MTN Group. And I'm not going to get too much into the technical language, but that is a very important thing to distinguish. And the MTN Group owns over 80% shares of the MTN Sudan subsidiary. And the other minority shareholder is an entity called Laricom Company. And the owner of that company, his name is Abdelset Hamza. He was sanctioned by the US Treasury Department, for allegedly financing terror activities in the Middle East. And we reached out to MTN and said, hey, this is one of your directors. He's a shareholder. Do you know that this is happening right now? And they said that when he was sanctioned in 2023, he also sent in his resignation and he no longer is involved in the MTN Sudan entity. However, what's interesting about Amza is that he was a very close associate to Omar al-Bashir, who was the former dictator of Sudan.
Yeah.
And essentially, what's been happening in Sudan since 2023 between this war between the RAF and the SAF is that we are unclear about the fact that when MTN receives a directive in Sudan to shut down the internet, like they say they are contractually obligated to do so, we don't know in a war context who is giving that directive. Is it the RSF or is it the SAF? MTN's transparency reporting doesn't make that clear. And this intimacy to political figures who have very shady backgrounds isn't an exception to Sudan.
So we have attempted to get a hold of MTN because we knew that we were going to be talking to you, and this was in an effort to balance the conversation. And they have responded in a statement, and I'm going to read just some of what they are saying, and I'd like for you to tell us whether you were able to talk to them. They say, and I quote, "Our robust governance structures guide our operations and safeguard ethical conduct across all levels of the company. As always, we'll remain open to engage constructively with relevant authorities and stakeholders to address any concerns." Were you able to talk to MTN and put these allegations to them?
We were not able to talk to them, but we did send them a written set list of questions, and they responded in kind, and all of their responses are reflected within the report. And I want to pick up on something that they mentioned in their statement, right? MTN in their statement makes it very clear that they are guided, right? They're guided by this the need to respect the rights of their consumers. And they've said this in other reporting of their financial reporting and transparency reporting as well. However, just because a company is guided to respect human rights doesn't necessarily mean that it is legally binded to respect and be obliged to respect those rights. And that is what our report is trying to tackle, that gap in the domestic and legal landscape where companies can say that they're guided and respect and commit to human rights in that regard, but are not legally obligated to do so.
You mentioned during the course of our conversation another big telecommunications company, Vodacom, and I have to admit the focus we thought was going to be on MTN. We didn't know that you also investigated Vodacom. So in this regard, we will have to give them the right of reply. But as a conclusion, where to now with your investigations? I mean, what happens next?
What happens next is a call to action to all attorneys out there in all the different countries that MTN, Vodacom, and the like operate in, and actually try and answer and grapple with this question of how private businesses can actually protect the human rights of their consumers in the telecom industry and not put it above profits. And moreover, we hope that South African local authorities, like the Hawks, will make public their investigations into MTN that they have conducted in the past and give us an update of what those investigations look like.
A.B. May, let me thank you very much for your time. She is an investigator with Open Secrets. And as we conclude this conversation, I must just tell you of exactly what the discussions were between ourselves and MTN. And yes, we did reach out to MTN and they've responded to the allegations, and they're saying that the allegations are denied, saying it's committed to conducting business with the highest levels of integrity, accountability and transparency wherever it operates. Now, the channel remains open to offering MTN this right of reply, and particularly in interview format, just as you've seen us doing with A.B. May. And if and when that is taken upon, we will be happy to engage with MTN. And this, of course, extends to Vodacom.